All right, buckle up everyone, because today we're diving headfirst into one of the most captivating mysteries out there, UFOs.
Yeah, we're going deep on UFO sightings and investigations this time.
And you, dear listener, are keen to know more about these enigmatic encounters in the sky.
Right, so we're going to be exploring some fascinating stuff today.
You're going to be delving into a declassified CIA document all about the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena.
You probably know them better as NICAP.
NICAP, exactly.
No.
So this isn't just some random collection of stories we found on the internet.
Not at all. This document is a meticulously compiled report put together by NICAP.
And what's especially intriguing is that NCAP was a private organization fully dedicated to investigating UFO sightings.
They took this seriously. We're talking pilot reports, observations from scientists, radar data, even photographic evidence.
Oh, wow. So we're dealing with some potentially credible stuff here.
Definitely, and we'll dig into all that.
They even touch on this phenomenon called angel's hair, which sounds absolutely bizarre.
We'll get to that later. It's a weird one for sure.
Okay, you've definitely piqued my curiosity, but let's start with these pilot sightings.
That's good.
I mean, pilots spend their lives in the air. They're trained observers.
Right. If anyone's going to spot something out of the ordinary up there,
There's got to be them, right?
exactly. And the document is packed with these pilot reports.
Really? Let's hear some.
Well, for instance, there's this case where a pilot describes seeing a disc-shaped object, classic UFO shape.
Okay, yeah.
But get this, it was passing below the horizon and in front of a mountain range.
Whoa, that's a pretty specific detail.
Right. It basically rules out any explanation involving stars or planets because, well, mountains are a bit closer.
You can't mistake a mountain for Venus, that's for sure.
Exactly. Then there's this other account, 4 pilots this time.
Okay, 4 pilots all seeing the same thing.
They saw this perfectly round disc
Yeah.
just hovering above the Hanford atomic plant.
Hanford, the nuclear site.
Yeah, that Hanford. And here's the kicker. It had these small vapor trails off it, like the tentacles of an octopus.
Now that sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie.
It's a pretty vivid image, right? But it's not just pilots. We've got trained professionals from all sorts of fields reporting these things.
Like who else?
Well, you have an astronomer at the Lowell Observatory, someone whose job it is to look at the sky.
Right, they know what they're looking at.
Exactly. And this astronomer observed a maneuvering elliptical UFO.
Wow, so this wasn't just a fleeting glance, it was something that caught their attention.
Absolutely. Then we have this report from General Mills.
Wait, the cereal company?
Yeah, well, they had a team launching research balloons. And these guys are trained observers, too.
Makes sense.
And they watched a maneuvering elliptical UFO for a good while. It wasn't just a quick blip on the radar.
So we've got detailed accounts from multiple trained professionals.
Multiple accounts, consistent descriptions. It's pretty compelling.
It definitely seems like more than just a few isolated incidents.
You're right, and it goes way beyond just pilots and scientists, too.
You're saying everyday people were seeing these things?
The report includes accounts from police officers, civil defense personnel, even average citizens.
So this suggests something pretty widespread was happening, something that was catching people's attention across the board.
It seems that way, and that's not even the strangest part.
It gets weirder.
Oh, yeah. There are cases in this report about electromagnetic interference associated with UFO sightings.
Are we talking about car engines stalling, lights flickering, that sort of thing?
Precisely. And not just a few cases either.
There were a lot.
Numerous cases, especially during a wave of events in Levelland, Texas.
Levelland, Texas, that rings a bell.
Imagine this, you're driving along, a UFO is spotted, and suddenly your car just dies.
That's freaky.
It really adds a whole other dimension to this mystery.
It does. And what about radar? Did these UFOs show up on radar screens as well?
Absolutely. There are documented cases where UFOs were tracked on radar, and at the same time, pilots and ground personnel were seeing them too.
So it wasn't just people seeing things. There was physical data to back it up.
Exactly. One of the most well-known examples is the Washington, D.C. sightings of 1952. We'll get into that one later.
So we're talking multiple forms of corroboration here. Visual sightings, radar tracking, even these physical effects on vehicles.
It's a lot harder to dismiss all that as just people misinterpreting things or making stuff up.
It is, and to top it all off, there's this whole section in the report that explores the idea of intelligent control.
Yeah, they're diving into whether these UFOs might actually be, well, piloted.
Okay, now we're getting into the really interesting stuff. What kind of evidence did they find that suggested these UFOs might be intelligently controlled?
Well, there are some truly baffling cases, like multiple reports of UFOs pacing vehicles, trains, automobiles, even a missile launch at White Sands.
Wait, UFOs chasing after a missile? That's pretty bold.
Right. It definitely makes you wonder about their capabilities and intentions.
It does. Were there any other examples of this intelligent behavior?
There are cases where UFOs seem to be evading pursuit by aircraft, like they're aware of being followed and don't want to be caught.
That's crazy.
But perhaps the most intriguing observation is what they call parent objects, releasing smaller objects.
Like a mothership sending out smaller craft. That's straight out of science fiction.
It is. It makes you wonder about the level of technology they might possess.
It does. But let's not forget, the Air Force was also investigating UFOs at the time with Project Blue Book, weren't they?
They were, and that's where things get really interesting.
How so?
Well, their perspective often differed quite a bit from what NICAP was uncovering.
So while NICAP was finding all this evidence that suggested something truly unusual was happening,
The Air Force, for the most part, seemed to be focusing on explaining away these sightings as more mundane occurrences.
like misidentified planes or weather balloons.
Exactly. And that's where we'll pick up next time, because this clash of perspectives is a fascinating part of the story.
It sounds like it. I'm already hooked, so we'll definitely have to explore that further in our next deep dive.
Absolutely. There's a lot more to uncover, so stay tuned.
Okay, let's jump back into our deep dive into UFOs, shall we?
Sounds good to me.
We've been looking at this declassified CIA document, really fascinating stuff about NICAP and their investigations.
Right, and NICAP, remember, they were pushing for more transparency, a more scientific approach to all of this.
Yeah, they even suggested setting up like a global network of observers to track these objects.
Ambitious. They really wanted to understand these UFOs.
And it's a shame they disbanded, but their work, it's so relevant even today.
Definitely.
But before we jump into the Air Force's perspective, their whole take on all of this.
Yeah, Project Blue Book and all that.
Right, I want to dig a little deeper into the actual sightings themselves.
Okay, yeah, what were people seeing? How were they describing these UFOs?
Exactly. Because this document, it's not just dates and location.
No, it's filled with these really detailed descriptions of the objects, their movements, even the reactions of the witnesses.
So it's not just like, I saw a light in the sky.
No, these are carefully documented accounts, often filled with technical observations, personal experiences.
Okay, so paint me a picture here.
Okay.
What were some of the most common shapes people were seeing?
Well, disc-shaped objects came up a lot.
The classic flying saucer.
Exactly. Flat, circular, sometimes with a dome on top.
Yeah, I can picture it.
Elliptical ones were also pretty common, kind of similar to the discs, but more oval-shaped.
Interesting.
And then you have the cigar-shaped objects,
Star-shaped, okay.
often described as metallic and elongated, sometimes with lights or windows along the sides.
Like a giant metal cigar flying through the air.
Pretty much.
It's amazing how these images have become so ingrained in our minds when we think about UFOs.
It is, isn't it?
But did people just see these things hovering in the sky, or were they moving?
Oh, they were definitely moving. And this is where things get even stranger.
How so?
The document describes these maneuvers, and honestly, they seem to defy physics as we know it.
Like what? Give me some examples.
We're talking sudden accelerations, incredibly sharp turns, the ability to just hover silently and then shoot off at unbelievable speeds.
So, not exactly your typical airplane behavior.
Not even close. We're talking right-angle turns
Yeah.
at super high speeds, going from a dead stop to hypersonic in an instant.
Things that would rip a normal plane apart.
Exactly. Witnesses often describe it as erratic, impossible. Those are the words they use.
Like they were watching something that just shouldn't be possible.
Exactly. Even pilots, people who spend their lives flying, they couldn't explain what they were seeing.
It really makes you question what you think you know about how things are supposed to work.
It does.
Okay, so we've got these strange objects moving in impossible ways.
Right.
But did they ever interact with their surroundings? Did they leave any physical traces, any disturbances beyond just, people seeing them?
Oh, you're talking about physical evidence.
Yeah, something tangible.
Right, because that's crucial in any investigation.
Exactly.
And yes, there are reports of physical effects connected to these sightings.
Like what?
Well, we talked about the electromagnetic interference, car engines dying, lights flickering and stuff.
Right.
But there are also reports of scorched ground where these objects were seen.
Really?
Yeah, broken tree branches and, in some cases, even traces of radiation.
Wow. Okay, so this wasn't just some visual phenomenon.
Yeah.
These UFOs were actually interacting with the physical world.
So they were having a real, tangible impact.
Okay, that's pretty mind-blowing.
It is.
Do you have, like, a specific example, something that really illustrates how strange and maybe even unsettling these encounters could be?
Well, there's the Levelland, Texas case from 1957.
Levelland, yeah, I've heard of that one.
It's one of the most well-documented cases with multiple sightings and those electromagnetic effects we were talking about.
Right. It was a big one, wasn't it? Lots of strange things happening.
So picture this. November 2, 1957, nighttime.
Oh.
The police in Levelland, they're suddenly flooded with calls.
Oh, wow.
A large, bright object in the sky.
A classic UFO.
But it's not just the lights that are weird.
Yeah.
As this thing passes overhead, people's car engines start stalling.
No way.
Headlights dim, radios cut out, all sorts of crazy stuff.
That's straight out of a movie.
Right. One of the most compelling accounts comes from this farmer, Pedro Saucedo.
Okay.
He describes encountering this, well, he said it was a blue egg-shaped object.
Blue and egg-shaped.
And it's hovering over the road right in front of his truck.
That's got to be terrifying.
And his engine dies, headlights go out, radio goes silent.
So everything just shuts down.
Then as soon as the object moves away, his truck starts right back up.
Just like that.
Just like that.
That's so creepy.
And it wasn't just him. There were tons of reports that night.
Really?
From police officers, other farmers, even a college student.
All describing the same thing.
Similar encounters, and they all experienced those electromagnetic disturbances.
What did the Air Force say about this? They had to have some explanation.
Your initial explanation, ball lightning.
Ball lightning, really?
Which is, well, it's a rare phenomenon, not fully understood.
Right.
But a lot of researchers, including NICAP, they argued that ball lightning, it just couldn't explain all of that.
The widespread effects, the consistent descriptions.
It just didn't add up.
Sounds like they were trying to force a conventional explanation onto something that was anything but conventional.
It's a good way to put it. The Levelland case, it became this classic example of how hard it was to figure out what was really going on.
Especially when there was this resistance to consider any possibilities outside the norm.
Exactly.
Okay, so we talked about a specific case.
Right.
But what about these UFO flaps that the report mentions? What are those exactly?
A flap, it basically means there's a sudden surge in UFO sightings.
Like a wave of activity.
Exactly. Could be in a specific region or even globally.
So imagine a time when UFO sightings are all over the news, everyone's talking about it.
People are looking up at the sky wondering what's going on.
It must have been a pretty intense time.
It was. And the report documents a bunch of these flaps, noting the patterns, the types of objects.
How it affected public perception.
Exactly. One of the biggest ones happened in the summer of 1952.
1952, okay.
Tons of sightings across the U.S., especially around Washington, D.C.
Oh, yeah, the Washington, D.C. sightings, those were big news.
With radar confirmations and everything.
Right. Pilots reporting strange lights, Air Force jets scrambling.
It really put the whole UFO thing on the map, forced people to pay attention.
Things were getting serious.
It definitely pushed the Air Force to take things more seriously.
And that led to the creation of Project Blue Book.
Right. They needed a way to officially investigate all this.
Seems like photographic evidence would have been really important back then.
It was, but incredibly difficult to capture.
I can imagine. Trying to get a clear shot of something moving fast and erratically with the technology back then.
Right. You're dealing with film cameras, waiting for the film to be developed.
It's not like today where you can just snap a pic with your phone.
Not at all. It was like trying to hit a moving target, but the target could just disappear or change direction at any moment.
Talk about a challenge.
Right.
But there are some intriguing photographic cases in the report, aren't there?
There are. The McMinnville, Oregon case, for instance, from 1950.
McMinnville, okay.
This couple takes 2 pictures of this disc-shaped object, pretty clear images.
Wow.
And then you have the Tremonton, Utah case from 1952, a series of photos showing a group of objects. They seem to be maneuvering in formation.
Like they were putting on a show?
It's wild. And some people even managed to catch UFOs on film, actual movie film.
Really?
Yeah, like this guy, Ralph Maher in Miami, Florida.
Miami, okay.
This was in 1954. He's filming with a 16mm camera, and he gets this footage of a fiery object moving incredibly fast.
How fast are we talking?
Calculations suggested it was traveling over 7,500 miles per hour.
7,000 miles per hour? That's insane.
Right. The footage was considered so significant that Maher, he sent it to the Air Force.
To analyze.
But guess what? The film was never returned.
Of course not. Seems like every time there's compelling evidence, it just disappears.
The pattern, isn't it?
It's super suspicious.
Yeah.
But I guess not every photo claiming to be a UFO was actually a UFO.
Right, the report acknowledges that.
Some turned out to be airplanes, weather phenomena, even hoaxes.
Exactly. Which is why it stresses the need for careful analysis, critical thinking.
You gotta look at the context, the credibility of the witness, all of that.
Don't just take everything at face value.
Right. So we've gone through a lot here. Pilot sightings, radar cases, electromagnetic interference, photos, even angel's hair. Did NICAP find any patterns in all this? Anything that hinted at a possible explanation for what these UFOs might be?
That's a great question, and it's what they were trying to figure out.
Right.
They didn't reach any definitive conclusions,
I figured.
but they did notice some recurring patterns. And they're pretty fascinating.
Okay, I'm all ears.
One of the most striking things was the consistency in the descriptions.
Okay, what do you mean?
Well, no matter where the sighting happened, who the witness was, people consistently described these specific shapes. Disc-shaped, cigar-shaped, spherical objects.
So it wasn't just a random hodgepodge of shapes. There was a definite pattern.
Exactly. And these weren't just random descriptions.
There was more to it.
The flight characteristics were consistent too.
Like how?
Hovering silently, making these incredible accelerations, those sharp turns we talked about.
The things that no known aircraft could do.
Exactly. All this consistency, it led NICAP to believe that UFOs, they were a real phenomenon.
Something that couldn't be explained away easily.
Right, and they weren't just misidentifications or hoaxes.
So if they were real, what were they? Did NICAP have any theories?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? They didn't have definitive answers, but they explored some possibilities based on the evidence.
Okay, let's hear it. What were some of the leading theories?
Well, given the technology these UFOs seem to possess, one theory was that they were extraterrestrial craft.
Alien spaceships.
Essentially. The maneuvers, the electromagnetic effects, the sheer number of sightings.
All from credible witnesses.
It pointed to the possibility that these things weren't from Earth.
It's the theory that captures the imagination, right? We're not alone, and some of these UFOs, they might be visitors from other planets.
It's a powerful idea. And while it's hard to prove or disprove conclusively with what we know,
Right.
It was a theory that NICAP took seriously.
Makes sense. The implications are huge.
It would change our understanding of everything, our place in the universe.
If it were true.
Absolutely.
But I'm sure there were other theories too, right? Didn't some people think that UFOs might be top secret government projects?
Yeah, that was another theory floating around.
Like some super advanced aircraft.
Experimental technology, maybe from the US or another country.
That are not aliens, it's just the government theory.
Right. But the report addresses that too.
Oh, so?
Well, if UFOs were secret government projects, you'd think they'd stick to specific areas.
Test sites, military bases, that sort of thing.
But with sightings happening all over the world, even over other countries.
It's hard to believe it's all secret government stuff.
Exactly. It just doesn't add up.
So if it wasn't swamp gas or secret government projects, what else could it be? Any other ideas out there?
There were some more speculative theories.
Okay, like what?
Some researchers suggested that UFOs might be natural phenomena that we just don't understand yet.
Okay, so something we haven't discovered.
Right. Unusual atmospheric conditions, strange electromagnetic disturbances.
Maybe there are forces at play in nature that we just haven't figured out yet.
It's possible. But the report points out that a lot of these natural explanations,
They don't quite explain everything.
especially the complexity of the UFO behavior, the consistent descriptions, the physical evidence,
So it seems like we're back to square one.
kinda.
Despite all the research, all the theories, the true nature of UFOs,
It's still a mystery.
it's frustrating but also kind of exciting.
That's the thing about UFOs, they keep us guessing.
They do. One thing that really strikes me in this document is the courage of the people who reported their sightings.
Yeah, it took a lot of guts to come forward.
Imagine seeing something that challenges everything you thought you knew about the world.
Something that defies logic.
And then to be told you're crazy or making it up.
A lot of these people faced ridicule, disbelief.
It takes guts to stand up and share your story when you know you might not be believed.
Absolutely. And remember, a lot of these witnesses were pilots, scientists, law enforcement officers,
Credible people.
people who had no reason to lie. They put their reputations on the line.
It makes you realize that they must have truly believed what they saw.
They felt it was important enough to speak up, even if it meant being ridiculed.
I think it highlights how we need to approach this topic with an open mind,
Definitely.
a willingness to listen to these people, To acknowledge that maybe we don't know everything.
There's always more to learn.
Right. So back to the document. We've talked about sightings, patterns, theories. Did it ever discuss the potential implications of UFOs, for humanity? Like, what if some of these things were extraterrestrial? What would that mean for us?
That's the big question, isn't it? And the report, it doesn't shy away from exploring those implications.
Both good and bad, I imagine.
Exactly.
Okay, let's start with the good stuff. What were some of the potential benefits people imagined might come from contact with an advanced alien civilization?
The possibilities are pretty mind-blowing.
Give me some examples.
Imagine accessing technologies beyond anything we can currently imagine.
Like what?
Advanced energy sources, interstellar travel, medical breakthroughs that could cure diseases.
That's like something out of Star Trek.
It is. It's the stuff of science fiction, but it could potentially become reality.
It would be incredible. But as we touched on earlier, there are potential dangers too, right?
Of course, anytime you're dealing with the unknown.
Especially an unknown civilization that might be more advanced than us.
Exactly. There could be misunderstandings, cultural clashes. We could even unintentionally cause harm.
It's like stepping into uncharted territory. You never know what you're going to find.
And the report acknowledges that contact with an alien civilization, it could even pose a threat
to humanity,
to our way of life, our values, even our existence.
That's a sobering thought.
It is.
So we've got these two extremes. Incredible progress or potential disaster.
And we don't even know what the odds are.
It's a cosmic gamble.
And that uncertainty is part of what makes this whole topic so captivating.
It is. But remember, NICAP wasn't just about investigating UFOs.
No.
They wanted to change how we approach the whole phenomenon.
They wanted to make it more scientific, more systematic.
They had specific recommendations, didn't they?
They did. They knew that chance encounters and anecdotal reports,
they weren't enough.
They advocated for coordinated observation, data collection, rigorous analysis.
They wanted to elevate UFO research to a legitimate science.
Exactly.
Okay, so what did they propose? How did they think we should move forward?
One of their key recommendations was to establish this global network of observers.
We talked about that earlier.
Equipped with advanced technology to constantly monitor the skies.
Like a worldwide UFO watch.
Yeah, with scientists from all over collaborating, gathering data, trying to understand these objects.
Pretty ambitious.
It was. They also wanted standardized protocols for reporting sightings.
To make sure the data was accurate.
Consistent, detailed.
So moving beyond just, I saw something weird, getting specifics about the object, its movements.
Treating it like a scientific observation.
And they also stressed the need for continued research into communication with extraterrestrial intelligence.
Right. If some of these UFOs were alien craft,
you'd need to know how to talk to them.
Exactly.
They were really thinking ahead, not just solving the mystery of what UFOs are.
But also preparing for what might happen if we do make contact.
It's a very forward-thinking approach.
It is.
But what about the other side of the coin? How did the Air Force respond to all of this? Did they embrace this more open scientific approach that NICAP was advocating for?
That's the million-dollar question. And it's where we're headed next, the Air Force's perspective, their explanations for UFOs, and how they interacted, or maybe didn't interact, with groups like NICAP.
Sounds like it's going to be interesting.
Definitely.
Okay, we're back, ready to wrap up our UFO deep dive.
Let's do it.
We've been exploring this declassified CIA document, really getting into the nitty-gritty of UFO sightings and investigations.
And how NICAP, they were really trying to push for a more rigorous scientific approach.
They weren't messing around. They wanted answers.
Definitely not.
But we've also seen how their findings, they often clashed with the Air Force's take on all of this.
Yeah, Project Blue Book. That was their big UFO investigation program.
Right. So how did the Air Force actually respond to what NICAP was uncovering? Did they take it seriously?
Well, that's where things get interesting, because their perspectives, they were often pretty different.
It seems like NICAP was all about openness, scientific investigation, while the Air Force was more focused on, well, explaining things away.
Keeping things under wraps, you could say.
Exactly. So what were some of the main arguments that the Air Force used against NICAP's conclusions?
Their main argument was that most, if not all, UFO sightings, they could be explained as misidentifications.
Misidentifications, okay.
They'd say people were just seeing things they didn't understand.
Like what?
Weather balloons, airplanes, stars, planets, unusual weather patterns, that sort of thing.
The classic, it's not aliens, it's just a weather balloon explanation.
Exactly. And while some sightings probably could be chalked up to those things.
Right.
NICAP, They argue that the Air Force, they were too quick to dismiss reports,
The reports that didn't fit neatly into those explanations.
especially when there was other evidence that pointed to something more unusual going on.
It sounds like NCAP felt the Air Force wasn't really investigating. They were just trying to debunk everything.
Yeah, that's the sense you get from the document.
So what kind of evidence are we talking about here? What did NCAP have that the Air Force seemed to be ignoring?
Cases with multiple witnesses, radar confirmations, descriptions of objects maneuvering in ways that no known aircraft could.
Things that couldn't just be brushed aside as someone seeing things.
Exactly. NICAP wanted a more thorough, unbiased look at the evidence.
It must have been frustrating for them to feel like their findings were being dismissed.
It definitely seems that way.
Did they ever confront the Air Force about this?
The report actually details instances where NCAP, they requested access to classified information.
They thought the Air Force might be hiding something.
But those requests were often denied.
Of course they were.
It created this sense of a wall between them, no real collaboration or open dialogue.
So instead of working together, you had this divide.
A private organization pushing for transparency, and a government agency seemingly more interested in secrecy.
It's a classic story, isn't it?
It is.
So what happened next? Did anything change?
Well, NCAP, they kept at it.
They didn't give up.
Through the 60s, 70s, they kept investigating, publishing their findings, speaking at conferences.
Raising awareness.
They even testified before Congress, advocating for a more open, scientific approach to UFO research.
They were real trailblazers.
Absolutely. And while they eventually disbanded in the early 80s,
Their work had a lasting impact.
definitely, they raised crucial questions about how we deal with the unknown, how we approach the things we don't understand.
It's inspiring to see a group of people so dedicated to finding the truth.
Even when faced with skepticism and resistance.
They didn't let that stop them.
No, they kept pushing forward, and that's a valuable lesson, I think,
It is.
for all of us.
Okay, so after diving into this document, seeing both sides of the story, it seems like we're left with more questions than answers.
It wouldn't be a true UFO deep dive without some lingering mystery.
That's true. What were these objects people were seeing? Were they something truly extraordinary or just a bunch of explainable events that got misinterpreted?
That's the question that keeps us coming back to this topic, isn't it? The not knowing, the possibility that there's something more out there.
And while this deep dive might not have given us all the answers,
Hopefully it's given you some food for thought.
it's encouraged you to think critically about the evidence, the different perspectives.
And maybe even to keep looking up at the sky, wondering what else might be out there.
Well said. And on that note, we're going to wrap up this deep dive into the world of UFOs.
It's been a fascinating journey.
We've explored compelling accounts, dug into scientific analysis, and grappled with conflicting viewpoints.
All reminding us that there's still so much we don't know about the universe.
And that's okay. The mystery is part of what makes it so intriguing.
Keep exploring, keep questioning, and who knows what you might discover.
Until next time, keep those eyes on the skies and keep diving deep.